Windbreaker, the jacket that can go against any wind, hence the name, Windbreaker. I love wearing them. They're light and so easy to pack. Wait, what am I doing? This is the wrong Windbreaker. Ugh. Anyways, Windbreaker is a manhwa and webtoon by Seok Jo that goes on for about 500 chapters. But don't worry because these chapters are pretty short compared to others. I talked about this in my sports video, but I put Windbreaker at my number 2 spot in my rankings of sports anime, manga, and manhwa. This is, by far, my most favorite sports manhwa of all time, and I'm going to tell you all why that is. Here's my review of Windbreaker. Windbreaker takes place in South Korea and follows the story of a kid named Jae-jo, who is a quiet kid at school that is hell-bent on studying in order to get into a good college, mostly because his mother forces him to study, and she takes him very seriously on that kind of stuff. A side hobby Jay has is biking, and one day, he races against a guy named TJ and wins by a landslide. Jay keeps biking in his spare time, and eventually, he meets a group of other kids at his school who form a team named Hummingbird to compete in a tournament called the League of Street. This is a team biking tournament where the best of the best amateurs compete in various biking street races. There are a whole lot of things that are good about this series, so I want to go over some of the pros of this series. The first thing you'll notice when you first read this series is that the art is kind of bland. But as you keep reading, the art gets so much better. Once you get to part 3 of the series, that's when the art becomes its best. And in some panels of the series, you can see how the art has improved from the beginning of the story. Another pro is that the character development, especially with the main characters, is really good. Jay seems to almost always be interested in biking, but eventually hides that interest and focuses less on studying as he races more. But one character I think makes huge developments in this series is his friend, Dom Kang. Dom Kang is the son of a mob boss and gets into trouble a lot. Then, he gets introduced to biking through Jay and his friends and becomes very interested in biking to the point where he becomes one of the best on the Hummingbird team. He's completely different in the later chapters compared to in the beginning, and his drive to succeed is very motivational because his development shows us readers that anything is possible when you work your hardest. There are many positive messages in this series. Also, these races are very intense, both in and outside of the races. There are many factors brought into these races from the outside, and affects how these racers do, such as a key racer being late, or someone laces themselves with drugs. You always wonder if anything will affect the outcomes of the races, and these races keep you at the edge of your seat with its pacing. All of these races seem long enough to drag out the pacing, but not too long that it becomes really boring. The relationships that all of these characters have with each other also raises the stakes for certain races and events. Everybody has great chemistry with each other, and the Hummingbird team is definitely a team you don't want to mess with. I also love the reliance on visuals. I find that a lot of comics these days put too much emphasis on their dialogue, which I feel is best suited for novels. This one doesn't do that though. The visuals tell the story perfectly, and for some chapters, you don't even need to read the dialogue to understand the story. Now let's get into some of the cons of this series. There's honestly not that many, but I think one major problem is that this whole series just focuses on the League of Street. With about 500 chapters of content, you'd think that the story would have many different arcs. Well, that's somewhat true, but it seems like the story is one big tournament arc, and there's not really much expansion beyond League of Street. This would be fine if the story was 100 chapters, but I think 500 chapters is too long of a focus to be on just one tournament. You start forgetting some of the details from the beginning of the tournament as you read on, but this series is still very enjoyable. That concludes my review of Windbreaker. Great series, very few cons, and a heck of a lot of pros. With that, I'll give this series a 9.5 out of 10. I love this series so much, and it's one of my favorite series on WEBTOON along with Lookism. If you have the time, go read this series right now. Do it. What are you waiting for? That's all my thoughts on Windbreaker. If you've read this series, what did you think? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know. And with that, I like Initial D better.